Introducing Recorded Content, a podcast for small, scrappy B2B marketing teams who want to get the most out of podcasting. In each episode, we capture stories from industry experts and podcasters. Listen in and uncover what it takes to launch, run, and grow a successful B2B podcast. Check out and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Let's jump in.
Hey, I'm Tristan. I'm the co-founder of Motion and your host for this episode of Recorded Content. This show is brought to you by my company, Motion. We are a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. Now, with a branded podcast, your company has the opportunity to connect with customers in a lot of different ways. And by developing audio, video, and written content from each episode, your company can really operate just like a media company. But creating content from a podcast episode is more than developing creative assets. I mean, how do you know what topics and questions to focus on? And how do you know what material to repurpose from each one of your episodes? Well, today I have Jeff Coyle on the show. Jeff is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at MarketMuse, which is a company that provides technology to help marketers with content planning and evaluation. And in this episode, we'll uncover how your company can not only identify the best topics to explore on your show, but will also determine how to enrich your existing content with repurposed assets from your podcast episodes. All right. Well, before we get into some of the meat of the content in the episode here, I wanted to start off up front asking about your approach to podcast guesting. When we did our pre-call, I know that you mentioned you've been on over 100 different podcasts so far, and sometimes you've done 20 in a single month. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, like, when did you decide to approach podcast guesting as a part of your really content strategy there?
That's a great question. So we had our own webinar. So we were doing more live events. We have our own webinar series, and we were doing one per month. And it just led into a lot of kind of manual people asking me to be on their shows or on a show that they were on. And we were consistently able to take kind of manually that up to a handful, a quarter outside of our own. Realized that we were having a meaningful impact for a lot of reasons. Our communities that we manage or that we participate in, the performance of our social media. And then we just made the decision to take a shot at finding some other avenues of getting those guest positions. It's been, I'd say, 100% successful in all of the goals that we were trying to do. The one thing that I would say I wish we were doing a little bit better would be having dedicated resources on the partnerships that get created from all of these things. So, making sure we're following up, doing, checking in on additional opportunities or people in the partners or the podcast host network. Those are things that I feel like we could be dedicating more resources to, but net, what the yield for us has been significant. It's kind of end to end, everything you'd want from a media appearance, and then it just breeds more media appearances. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's kind of like this networking effect, literally. But when you say it provided a positive yield, like what does that mean in your eyes?
Sure. So the couple pieces there where we're getting direct connections as a result of it that are meaningful. Partnerships is one outcome, certainly, and those could be co-marketing relationships. Those could be direct sales, customers, podcast hosts that become customers even, which has happened multiple times, which, for us, if you think about the return on investment, on a software provider who has a, average deal size north of, $18,000 a year, it becomes very easy to make a return on investment for those types of premium agreements. But also it's been, just getting the yield is more physical appearances, and then obviously additional podcasts, and then the kind of the impact into our, inbound lead machine effectively. So our inbound lead machine is the main way that we operate. We don't do much outbound at all. We do very little paid. That's non-event. And so our main goal at MarketMuse is to keep that engine, running with as much fuel as possible. We changed what the status quo is for inbound leads and then new activity. The bar rose a reasonable amount since we've started this. So it just keeps that kind of what the starting point is, growing. And it's been pretty significant, as far as, going from our other channels to where we can have some attribution to whether it's a YouTube recording, whether it's a podcast
Yeah.
recording, whether it's a direct connect, all of that has a, meaningful first or second order attribution to that lead machine.
Yeah, and Jeff, when we were doing our pre-call, we were trying to figure out exactly which angle to take for this
Right.
episode, and I remember you saying, I'm very comfortable talking about this, and this, and there are a variety of things that we could narrow in on.
Mhm.
So, how do you feel guesting on podcasts have really helped you articulate some of the functionality at MarketMuse, as well as just like some of the messaging with your company in general?
For me now, just tracking back, you reminded me the one other piece is where we're able to collaborate on kind of rich media optimization. Just how, we've been able to help podcast hosts get more out of the content that they're creating with audio and making sure that it gets transcribed, make sure it gets repurposed, et cetera. So that's something that I commonly end up talking to, whether it's on the recording or not. But for me personally, my background is, I'm really into things like improv, whether it's business improv training. It's definitely enabled me to hone my skills there, with kind of in a laughable way. I've been speaking, but for quite a long time about search engine optimization and content strategy and lead generation. However, in the past, you don't really get a flavor of that until you become a bit of a co-founder. I kind of get the sense of,
Yeah,
so you're
kind of
constantly,
forcing
yeah,
function there. Yeah.
exactly. You're constantly on kind of front street, as far as being, held accountable for making sure you have the messages right. I'd say it's increased my ability to be successful on my toes in all situations, dramatically. I used to joke around when I ran an in-house team at a company called Tech Target that, you probably heard someone say the adage of the T-shaped marketer. The T-shaped marketer is
Yeah.
there's a lot of different tasks across the top of the T, and you go deep on one, and that becomes the way you can really, specialize in your career. I always used to joke around internally and said, I don't want any T's on my team. I want squares, and I
Right.
want them to go deep and dive. What this has allowed me to do is exhibit that, there are some, webinar bookers and organizers or influencer marketers, and I always tell them there's about 90% of the topics you'll likely have a webinar on. If you ever need me, you can add me. And it's allowed me to kind of follow through with that, and be able to be valuable regardless of the panel that I'm on. In most cases, I think there's only been one request where I was like, "Yeah, I don't know anything about that." But it's allowed
Which
kind of
one was
that to
that?
shine. It was my background's in usability theory. From when I was at Georgia Tech, I did search engine work, kind of the earliest versions of text search as well as usability. And so someone propped me up to do 508 compliance on a webinar. And I was like,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
haven't done 508. I said, I could speak to it from the lens of why it's important and such, but I haven't done any work in 508. As far as, and that's, for accessibility, there's far more people that are, more, able to communicate that than I am. But yeah.
Well, good news, Jeff. We won't touch on 508 compliance for the rest of the episode. So
I'm
that's
sure. I'm sure
good.
the audience
You're off the hook.
was getting ready to yawn, and then now
Yeah.
they're like, "Okay, cool, we're good with that." But no, it's been good. It's been.
Yeah.
I don't hesitate to support anyone who desires to have a particular topic, as long as I can find a connection to code, something where I can speak from experience. I'm not a speculator. I'm speak from experience first. That's what makes good podcasts and webinars.
And since we're talking about your podcast guest appearances, I mean, that's really what I drew from as far as inspiration
Mhm.
to guide some of the questions and things today. And there was one that caught my eye. I listened to several recent episodes you were on. One of them stood out to me. The title was, let me make sure I get it right. Your content strategy is bullshit. So I said, why not? I should probably let me check that one out. But during that episode, you uncovered two main issues that you often see with a company's content strategy. And that
Right.
is number one, it's too close to a sales pitch, or number two, it's way too far from actually answering a customer's question to be of any value. So how did you come to that conclusion? Was that something that you recognized even before MarketMuse, or is that a result of working with your customers now?
Gosh, it's my whole. That's a wonderful question. It's my kind of my whole career is distilled into that outcome, and the first 7 or 8 years of me working in search engine optimization and content strategy and lead gen and product management were building a lead management and lead generation product effectively, and then optimizing it through organic search. And I wasn't thinking about the why the content was made. I was just trying to get those people leads. Basically, what we were doing was selling leads to software companies at scale, trying to get them
Yeah.
to write content and let us syndicate it effectively and let us market it via our directories. When we were acquired by a company called TechTarget, who I mentioned before, they had a team of editorial experts, hundreds, in fact, and a major network of writers. That was when I really recognized the gap between what an editorial person or a content manager or content marketer wants to write versus what maybe they should write. And then maybe what the search engine optimization professionals or demand gen team wants them to write. All the time, those things are not connected. And when you look
Yeah.
at, the thing that you mentioned, product content is often separated from SEO content, from editorial content, from PR content. The That disconnect is just still a massive way of there being a problem internally, where people are feeling like those different types of content deserve different KPI or deserve something that kind of creates or amplifies the silos from which they are kind of formed. And that's where I speak about that a lot. It's because the problems there are much more ingrained in just the way you think about it versus does something work or does something not. So my experience is, my entire life in this world of 23 years of doing this is kind of the
Yeah.
manifestation of that. Like you've got to get everybody unified around one set of KPI or one set of measurements so that they recognize that there's not just one type of content. There's not just one type of content strategy. You have to have it so that all the content helps all the other content because that's how it's viewed. I mean, imagine if a prospect comes to your site and they read one article that was written by, you know, editorial, one written by product, one written by SEO. Okay, first of all, what are the odds that that's going to have a unified voice? What are the odds it's going to have, a great unified experience? And plus, if they bounce from something that was, a passion piece by an editor, then it goes to a product related thing that's like, bits and bytes why we're awesome. And then they hop into a, random low quality article. What are they going to really think about your company? How connected are they going to feel like you, and how empathetic are they going to feel that you are? And that's why a lot of times I'll mention that, you know, customer first content, business issue, empathetic content, however you want to think about it, gets you part of the way there. And then it's a focus on those unifying metrics like we want our company to exhibit expertise. We want our company to tell the story that we know everything that somebody would want to know. If you are in the learning journey, in the research or buying journey, we're the place that's going to get you that exhibition of expertise, solve your problems, you know, be both entertaining as well as get you to the next stage of your, whether, like I mentioned, information or buying, whatever those goals are. And that's where I think teams typically will look back that's when their mirror starts to get clear. They're like, uh-oh, I'm thinking about this completely wrong. And then that kind of leads to why somebody might want to consider using data to drive portions of their content strategy.
Yeah, and Jeff, you mentioned unifying metrics to
Mhm.
determine if you have this unifying voice. So what does that look like if I'm a head of content? How do I know if I have a unifying experience or maybe it's a little bit jumbled to our customers?
That's a great question. Way we can, without even reading the content, right? You can know that by understanding how people decide the what and the why with the content that's created on your site or publishing network or your network of sites. The what might be the topics that we cover. It might be the personas. Say if you're in the sales enablement space, which would be, how does marketing get salespeople to do stuff, right? The sales enablement space, right? One of the things, and Pam Didner, she's a sales enablement guru, so I'm kind of taking this from her because it's relevant. Is to say, does your marketing funnel match your sales funnel? I'm like, what? Does the way that you measure leads going into customers and then post sale, does that match the way that the sales team believes that they will take a user from first touch to close deal? And if it doesn't, that's an exhibition of there being a major gap. Does your sales
Yeah.
force, stages, do they match your marketing, buy cycle, right? That's an easy way of going, uh-oh. Well, the equivalent of that works for content to say, okay, why do we create this content? For what reason? What expectations do we have? How predictable are the metrics that we use? How commonly do we achieve the goals of the content that are set forth? Or is there any dogma that's just there? Hey, content is a crapshoot, right? Content's not predictable. We can't expect
Hmm.
anything of it. Or this type of content isn't for that, is commonly said. So like, oh, well, we don't expect traffic to this content. We don't, these news team does what they want, right? Or, you can't use data to inform this type, or, oh, that's just SEO content. Like those are the things you're listening for. A lot of times that then manifests with those groups having their own metrics for success. So your writing team may get, they may be incentivized by nothing. First of all, a lot of content teams and a lot of editorial teams
Yeah.
have no
Like
incentives. Yeah,
no metrics.
no metrics, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of them, it's going to be by volume. Some of them may get paid on, overall traffic growth, but it's not ever direct attributed. Engagement data, demand gen's getting paid on their lead flow, right? SEO is getting paid on their organic traffic. Social may be being incentivized by multi-channel or cross-channel. It's just a huge, huge disaster when you think about it. What other teams can you imagine about that relate to a, one payload item, right? Where there's 6 teams that all get paid
Yeah.
on different factors. It just creates this dramatic ambiguity. So unifying factors. Oh, by the way, and I haven't even touched on post-sale docs, depending on the size of your work, right? The forums, the support content, customer content. What content are you creating that will turn your customers into advocates or into referral partners or generating virality or solving problems that customers still have even after they've adopted your product? The divide in large enterprise B2B technology between pre-sales docs and post-sale docs, I mean, you might as well have the wall inside the organization, like visibly between the two groups.
Yeah.
And so imagine if you're dealing with the voice of the customer. Imagine if you're thinking about tone and voice. Imagine if you're thinking about what should we cover and why? That's why things like looking at customer lifetime value, looking at authority, topic authority, looking at, coverage levels and expertise, like how frequently we're exhibiting expertise at various stages of the funnel. when you're talking about a topic, for example, do we have coverage of this for everyone that possibly might interact with our organization? Not just one page, one word, which, in some organizations is what they're doing. And, I'm saying a lot, but in the end, I'm giving a lot of different things that you may take a piece of this and identify with it. Oh, wow. Yeah, we do that. Oh gosh. Yeah, that's our problem. This is where, hey folks, we need a content strategist. We need someone thinking about this. We need to bring all these teams together. Once the editorial team, the content team, or the more content marketing team, the demand gen team, and the SEO team are getting along, that's the magic happens. I mean, those are the best teams. They get it.
Yeah, and so Jeff, if let's say I am in kind of that stage
Mhm.
where I might be, one, like you said, one word, one page, which is very common, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
kind of goes back several years.
Yeah.
But like, let's say I'm in that stage, or I am a little bit more siloed off,
Mhm.
where you have your SEO content here that's feeding some organic traffic,
Right.
but then there's also this piece over here where it's tailored more to our customers, and we're trying to,
Right.
uh, enrich the success factors
Mhm.
on this side of the house. How do I take a step back, and what are some of the first steps that I can take to maybe creating more of a unified team here?
Great. No, I mean, that's a great question, and I'll give you two ways this typically happens. One is where you've been self-aware enough to realize, whoa, I'm writing this blog, and not everyone in the organization gives it the respect of having an influence on the business bottom line, right? They just think it's a thing, right? That operates over there, and they just think it's um, you know, not necessarily predictable. It just does it. We need a blog, right? And but this other thing that exists from some way, shape, and form. How do you get it? Really, that's where internal education and advocacy of the fact that we are one business. We have site sections, but we have entire site. All of the content that we're creating, whether we like it or not, is working together to, and it can be used to our advantage to grow our ability to perform. People will wayfind on their own. They will navigate throughout the site. If we're not using tactics like internal linking properly, we're actually hurting the customer's ability to wayfind. In addition to hurting our organic search success, where we're breaking the experience that, Google wants to provide or organic search wants to provide, which is the best for the user, get them to the answers. And so what the message internally is, hey, no matter what, folks, whether we like it or not, all of our content's already acting as this one blob on this topic or this one entity on this one topic. So it's in our best interest to put our best foot forward with our content. It's almost impossible to believe that with with that type of setup, that there's an executive team or there's somebody with meaningful responsibility in an organization's that is going to go, yeah, I'm cool with low quality content. I'm cool with content that
Right.
doesn't do what we want it to do as an organization. Yeah, it's, like that. I don't think that passes muster today. So I think when you expose that or you give examples internally of user experiences that are subpar or that aren't unified, that's when people start to get it. A great example would be where um, people who are looking for a particular, yeah, I like to call it intent mismatch a lot of times, right? People are looking for, they
Mm.
get to your site thinking that your page is going to deliver one thing, but it actually doesn't deliver that. And they have a bad first experience with your company. Well, that's the type of thing you want to show and communicate internally. Hey, folks, we have people that are looking for, you know, how do you get bees out of your garage? Right. And they land on our garage door homepage. Right? That's not what they were
Yeah.
looking for. That's not what they were looking for, right? And or the people were people were looking for, or we marketed it to be, we're the thought leaders in this technology category, right? We're the thought leaders in content intelligence. And they land on like some weird product page that like pushes them to sign up
Yeah.
for a demo. They were trying to learn about content intelligence as a concept, right? And that's when the gloves, like, oh gosh, we shouldn't have gloves on or gloves off. There shouldn't even ever be a fight. We've got to get the client into this. Another example in e-commerce is fun. This happens a lot when you don't have great taxonomies or ontologies driving the data in product listings. I might type in red dress, right? The people who are producing great taxonomies for their e-commerce, that you might get our category page for red dresses. But if you don't have a great infrastructure, I might show you red dress SKU 4694. That might be my best foot forward in the search results. Well, that's a situation that, and how likely is it that the person that types in, red dress is going to see SKU 5942 or whatever I said and be like, ooh, I like that
Yeah.
one. No, that's not putting your company's best foot forward. The odds of them loving that dress, not so good. And so that happens a lot. So your red dress SKU 4851 might be your product page. It might be a blog that you wrote that gets too much traffic. It might be a page from 6 years ago that people are afraid to touch. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's causing bad experiences. So the best unifying factor, I think, is to tell people all our content already works together. We're not matching the intent of our customers, and we've got huge gaps. What happens if someone comes to our site, they land on our beginner's guide to X, right? But they're an expert. What should they do? We don't have that content item for them. What if they're from a particular industry? Let's say they're, I use this one a lot for obvious reasons, but they're, let's say they're in the brewing industry and they land on basics of CRM. And there's no industry specific content for them. Well, I immediately don't feel like you understand me, right? What if I have that content?
Right.
It's just not linked, right? So because it's from SEO or because it's from, some other team. And so all of those things just, they roll downhill to exhibit problems. I've had teams, and then I'll stop for a second. I've had teams where large enterprise organizations, where particular teams own keywords and no other teams are allowed to write about them.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's the worst possible situation. But if you're anything close to that, or, your demand gen team doesn't know the value of early stage awareness content, and they're like, stop writing definitions or stop writing guides. They don't generate leads, right? So all of those things are exhibitions, and you've got to get, that's where you need that unifying voice. You've got to get everyone realizing that everything we write about, audio equipment all works together, and we can use it to our advantage.
Yeah. And Jeff, you mentioned something called intent mismatch.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Haven't really heard that term before.
Right.
And there's something that comes to mind here. I mean, even selfishly is, I've seen a podcast help in this way where, you're linked so closely to your customers and you start to hear their words, you start to hear how they phrase things, how they're solving their own problems, and that can help drive some of your content. So I'm curious if we shift to that aspect of it. I know that you all run a webinar series. It behaves a lot like a podcast scenario, interview based, and you're kind of having these conversations drive some of your other content. But where do you see from your perspective a podcast kind of fitting into the content equation of a company?
No, it's a great question. You can you have various strategy, right? Various possible strategy for or tactics that you apply to what a podcast could mean. My personal one is I try to have guests that may be in semantically related or adjacent spaces, not necessarily on the nose for what we do, plus ones that are right on the nose, because I want to build up a content kind of cluster that relates to everything you'd ever want to know about content. even though we focus specifically on a subset of that. So you can actually think abstractly like that. So I might be able to get the best person in PR for crisis communications, right? I don't sell PR for crisis communications. But if you are in content and search engine optimization, knowing a lot about that and how it might connect to content strategy elevates you in your professional life. We may also, by doing that, we also will get their audience, right? Their audience can
Yeah.
exist within people that follow them as individuals in their role as well as their business. So I'm trying to get, selfishly, like you mentioned, I'm trying to get their followers. I'm trying to get to the community that they influence and that their company influences. And so if I'm touching on a different group each time, I'm adding the most possible range to my bullets effectively. And that's the spirit. When I can take all of that content and repurpose it to suit my needs. I'm speaking about this very like odd, like chessboard today, but you think about it. If you, I'm repurposing this content to suit my needs. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it is that I want, I want to take that transcript. I want to turn it into landing pages. I want to use chunks of our conversation to market to one audience. You know, we might spend a minute of this conversation talking about, how SEO impacts PR. Well, I might take that and run with it and write an article about it. But in the end, you wouldn't have, imagine this, right? Imagine you had a podcast where you only interviewed the same 4 people over and over and over again,
Mhm.
right? Or your reach hits a local maximum and you don't want, if you're in marketing, the last thing you want is a local maximum. If you're in product, the last thing you want is to hit that local maximum. You want to always be having 100% coverage of and expansion of the addressable space.
Yeah. And as you're talking this through, I
Moneyball
mean,
podcasting. We're gonna Moneyball podcast. You and me, Tristan.
Moneyball, yeah,
Moneyball podcasting. We're in it.
that
Let's go.
we're gonna figure it out right
Yeah.
now. You mentioned like, and it sounds like we describe it in a way of like being on the fringe.
Mhm.
Like it's like we advise typically to go very specific on your podcast, and then kind of touch on the fringes of all these other challenges that might kind of touch some of the other pain points that they have that are outside of maybe what your technology solves. But that's how you
Yes.
kind of loop in other people that you might not already be familiar with from
Yeah.
a company standpoint. And so what are some examples? Like you mentioned that on the PR side,
Mhm.
that's kind of one of those categories or whatever.
Yep.
Walk us through like how your technology is very SEO research
Mhm.
focused, right? You're helping people determine what to write about or what content to drive on your site. But what are some of those other categories that you're kind of on the fringe with your podcast as an example?
That's a great question, and it's also super top of mind. This is like the perfect day to be talking about this because we're booking the speaker list for our 3-day event. We do a virtual event next year. We're hoping it goes hybrid, but it's going to be virtual, and so we're booking the speaker list for that. So it's really top of mind for us to cover all of the possible areas of opportunity. So the fringes, I would say, some go into particular subfields. So that's like where they're, in search engine optimization, for example, there is technical search engine optimization. There is search engine optimization professionals who are really good at brand search engine optimization, reputation management, local, e-commerce. So those would be kind of like sub tiers. But we'll also be thinking about people who are in content. So content, gosh, it's huge, right? There's so many different avenues that
Yeah.
they could be thinking about. The fringes in content we think about are, content thought leaders, like what should you be writing? Content strategists. Content strategy is a practice. I mean, it is if you are a content strategist at a major B2B company, that's a very, very unique title. And that's special, right? Very different than, for example, someone who's very strong in content analytics. Very different than someone who's strong in being a great writer or editorial operations, or
Yeah.
just all around SEO versus somebody who maybe is heavily interested in, link development or business development as a function and how that influences search. So we'll look for specialization underneath the main categories of content and search. And then this third piece would be, what are the things that all people who operate within those orgs also care about, but maybe aren't focused on? PR is a great example. Rich media, great example. How do I integrate video, audio? Other examples would be uh, operations, marketing operations would be another one. So I'm just not getting stuff done. Everyone has those problems, right? So we might get
Yeah.
somebody who's like super awesome at doing website migrations. Might get someone who is just the PR guru who's also good at SEO. And so that's the way that we would be kind of looking to book in
Got
those
it.
types of scenarios. Yeah.
So you have this event. It's
hmm
virtual now, and
hmm
you're looking to maybe make that hybrid in the
Supposed to
future.
be.
Yeah, you have, who knows what's happening next year.
Right.
You also have this ongoing webinar series
hmm
that I know is on your site as well. So how, once you get these conversations in place, and how you have these
Right.
extended conversations, 30, 60 minutes
Right.
long, what have you, how do you then determine what gets repurposed
hmm
from there?
Repurposing is, first of all, this is something I'm super passionate about. Um, Repurposing is one of the hardest things that looks really easy. It's really hard to stay disciplined on it, to always do at least a certain amount. It feels like it's just work that you're doing to check boxes. You've got to stay really disciplined on it. The easiest example is kind of transcription, but then you can build from that. This is where a content strategist who's very well versed in repurposing needs two things. One, the freedom to be creative, and then two, the meets minimum that you apply to each content of a particular type. So I recommend that teams, in our case, we have kind of standard operating procedures for each type of content that we invest in money or time. It has to get at least this much. These other pieces have to launch, both because we know that they're going to be successful, and because you know, it also gives the content strategist the freedom to take some swings. I'll give you two examples. We had an event we felt was undercovered. It was a live event, so we made the decision to cover it outrageously, overcover it. We felt it was going to get undercovered. So the
Yeah.
content strategist had the opportunity to say, hey, I believe we should write, in this case, I believe it was something like 60 something pages before this event goes live, because we believe it's going to be undercovered. And,
Yeah.
another one, we had uh, I have an upcoming guest who is, you know, one of my favorite people in the space. So I've prepared, in my case, Steven and Tatiana on my team, to say, hey, we're going to want to make sure we do this at a different level than we typically do. Really go bananas with all the refactoring and repurposing of this. So, how do you make those decisions? You can make them preemptively. You could also take and do kind of that bullets to cannonballs approach. If you do see some speed or some snowballing happening with what you do produce, you should have a standard operating procedure to expand that, and expand it by writing content, annotation, turning one page into 10 in a way where you're not turning one page that's good into 10 bad pages. You're turning it into one page into 10 good pages, right? So repurposing a lot of times
Yeah.
gets a bad rap, but everything you produce should still be high quality. It's that, our conversations, human conversations, natural ones miss things, right? So we could be talking about, everything you'd want to know about some topic. We're going to have a blind spot. We're not going to get to it. Well, a great content strategist can read that and go, ooh, Tristan and Jeff's conversation, they were talking about rich media optimization, and they didn't talk about podcast platforms. Well, I can put a little block in my transcription and say, another element of this is podcast platforms. Check out this article that covers all the most popular podcast platforms and why they're different and how they impact rich media optimization, and then go write that piece. So you can fill gaps in your media and also repurpose all as one motion. You just got to you got to get people who understand all this. You got to set minimums, and you got to give them the freedom uh, to go big every once in a while. And that's been our recipe for success.
Yeah, I like that where, it kind of works two ways where you might have this long conversation, but there might be gaps in that conversation that you could fill with other stuff that you have. And then it works the other way where you can take elements of that conversation and then build out other pieces. So
Right.
that's an interesting perspective there. And you mentioned two important things that come out of like an initiative that you have, which is the freedom to try new things, and then secondly, having this meets minimum criteria, right,
Right.
where you at least have to do or get these things out of it. When did you figure that out? Because I feel like a mistake that I see often is I've seen in my career where people will say that they want to do something very creative or different. They'll put all their eggs in that basket. It will fail, and then they're scared to try something like that again. It seems like you've figured out the balance here. How did that happen?
I've seen it fail so much. Repurposing is this because it's slightly painful. This is my conclusion, right? Totally speculative, and it's through my experiences kind of summarizing, but it's because it is painful. It feels like it's not going to be, it feels like it's kind of cheap, right? It feels like it's not as good as the original. And so people will kind of do it, but they're not really behind it. They're not really tuned into how valuable it could be. And so you asked on that's been my experience, and creating that SOP just requires that we knock it out, right? It requires we think creatively about how to get the most out of your investments. How this really came to me in a dream. No, it came to me in I can't get into the details, but of the exact person and who it was. But this was well over a decade ago. A project I used to do rich media optimization as a side hustle. That was my core consultation. Even when I was working, it keeps me abreast of certain industries. I always used to say, like, if you're an in-house, you need to have a side hustle to consult on industries you're not in, or else you're going to get stale, right? So I used to consult on
Yeah.
a number of other industries. It got me to working with a podcast that at the time was struggling to grow. Um, I transitioned them to be thinking about rich media. I created what was called the 7 planes of rich media optimization hell for them. And it was show notes only, no transcription, transcription, transcription with annotation, transcription with annotation with repurposing, with secondary interviewing, and like all this, like, and we're like, you have to get to at least level 2 with every podcast. There is no meat that, and
Yeah.
then as the opportunities open up, get to those next levels. So you maybe want to think of it as orbits of planets if you don't want to talk about the planes of hell. But that's the way that it worked extremely well. I believe we 50x'd their podcast. But that was a long time ago when that was a little bit easier. And the topic was
Yeah.
very, very specialized. But that became kind of my thing. It's another example was a business that I was part of the acquisition on. The person who was the representative of that business had a 200-page book. Guess what? You can only get to that book behind buying that book, right? And I
Yeah.
said, we need to turn that book into 1,000 pages of content. And they were like, what? Oh. And then kind of making that case internally, turning that into uh, a traffic juggernaut. that was like blew people away. And I've actually repeated that process multiple times. So telling those examples, those were what made me realize that you got to at least do a little bit, because you might get lucky. And if you invest $5,000 into an ebook and the only way to get to it is via a landing page that has 400 characters on it, you broke it.
Yeah.
It happens all the
Yeah.
time in B2B tech. I mean, you spend $10,000 on this beautiful article and there's only one way to get to it. Or this beautiful ebook, this beautiful white paper. There's only one way to get to it, and it's through a landing page that can't possibly do it justice. Those examples
Right.
get people off their chairs and like, whoa, this is so broken. I mean, and that's when, creating these meets minimum. Hey, if we spend more than 1,500, we spend more than $5,000 on an article, it needs to manifest as 20 pages. Like, simple
Yeah.
workflows like that change people's brains about repurposing.
No, I'm with you. Like we're speaking the same language here, because and I love the SOP angle, because I feel like a lot of people are like, all right, sure, I'll get a podcast episode, I'll build out 5 other things, but if you literally don't have that in your project management system and you don't build it out as
Never
tasks,
do it.
they just won't get done. So I like the mindset of just having, at a minimum, make sure you do this, and then add this layer of experimentation, or creative freedom to try new things. That way, you're really reducing the risk of having an episode fail, because you at least get a certain amount of things from it. So I
Yeah.
like that angle. And that said, I know we're coming up on our time here, Jeff, but I wanted to ask. Most organizations aren't perfect. They don't have a perfect content strategy. Even MarketMuse is probably not perfect. So what are some things you're looking to maybe adjust or change, in the near term here?
Oh my gosh, we are so far from perfect. And I say that with the most respect for everybody who touches any content, but no, um, some of the things that, we don't even hit on all those SOPs every time. I mean, there's pieces of, even in our rich media optimization, even in our monetization of content, some of the ones that we are certainly looking to do. And then also, I think everyone should take stock of, our content updates are not the same as content upgrades. Okay. And this one breaks some brains a little bit. You need to go back and update content through data-driven reasoning. You have to go back and update content if it's out of date, if it's not current with today's intent, if it wasn't very good in the first place, if it's not as good as or better than what's representative of competitors, whether it's publisher or direct competitors. You've got to have an update cadence. Content upgrades often get conflated with content updates, but content upgrades are where we used to call them targeted downloads, right? Where you're providing some amount of premium value on a page that gets somebody to take an action that they wouldn't have taken if it was just a content block, right? You need both of those two things, no matter what the organization you are in, whether you're e-commerce or otherwise. You need to be doing those two things right now. I will commonly see those two things are representative of people who need more data driving what to create and what to update, which is the core problem that we solve at MarketMuse. Is what should I create? What should I update? How much content do I need to create? How much content do I need to update on what topics? And then how do I make sure that what I write is both differentiated and high quality and exhibits expertise? But the way that manifests for me today is I would love to have a better content upgrade process, and I would love to be updating more of my content that aligns with what my own platform tells me I should be doing. A cool example of that is,
Yeah.
is a lot of times I'm shooting a note to my content strategist in Slack, and I'm saying, hey, I was just on a demo. Here's the video of that demo. I was using the MarketMuse account, and I surfaced 2 examples just naturally that we need to write. And he's like, yep, add it to the list, Jeff, add it to the list, but it's so cool when it's like that, we said, Moneyball podcast, but it's it's really that. It's to say, I'm confident that if you go write this article, it has a better than random potential to be successful. I have a predictive outcome. I mean, that's what artificial intelligence brings. It's predictability where there was no predictability before, where people thought that it was a crapshoot. And the thing that I would allow out of any listener that cares about content is just take stock as to how much content you're creating or updating and how much of it is successful. And think about what that does to your real costs. If you're punching 5-10% with your content, I mean, your real costs, you don't have to tell everybody internally, right? Your real costs are like 10x what you say they are. And because, and the way you're kind of probably getting away that is like content's unpredictable. Well, if you say something's unpredictable and you are in a professional situation, your goal is to make it unpredictable. I mean, be unpredictable, or be predictable,
Fix it.
not unpredictable. You want to figure out a way for more of your punches to hit. And that's the difference that I'm always looking to make internally for our team, but it's also the difference that I look to make for every one of our clients. So
Love it. Jeff, it's a good spot to end. And thanks for talking Moneyball with me today. It was a lot of fun. Where can people go to find out more about you and MarketMuse?
Oh man, yeah, it's super clear that I love podcasts and just the art of marketing them as well. But no, Jeffrey_Coyle on Twitter, Jeff at marketmuse.com, or LinkedIn. I answer everything. I love this stuff. If you've got any questions about content, search, hard ones, easy ones, the nerdiest ones, or the most basic, I love it. So just shoot me a note and I will help you out.
All right. Awesome. Well, Jeff, thanks for joining me on Recorded Content today.
For sure. Thanks so much. See ya.